This is Rachael Gilbert, and you are listening to the Radical Radiance Podcast.
Rachael, I am so excited to have you back on the show. Thank you for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about the conversation. You and I were talking back and forth a few months ago, and it was so sweet when the Lord does this because we've been in the middle of this series for about 2.5 months, walking through my newest book, You're Not Too Late, Trusting God's Timing in a Hurry Up World. And we've gone through it chapter by chapter. This is the very last one. So for our listeners who are new to the show, or you're listening because you're a friend of Rachel's, we have a whole series about trusting in God's timing and how do we navigate seasons of longing in our hearts. And as I planned out each of these episodes, some of the episodes, it was an immediate like, oh, I need to call that person, or, oh, this friend of mine wrote a book on that topic. And so many of them were pretty easy, but this last chapter actually sat on my calendar for a long time without having what I felt like was like, yes, I want to have a conversation with that person about this. And then you and I had kind of a sidebar just catching up about life and this book launch and all the things. And you brought up this topic of resentment and just kind of offered like, if there's a place for us to have a conversation about it, I would love to do that. And it was so wild and so the Lord, because it was kind of this open space on our calendar. And so it was in my heart immediately when like you were talking about it, I thought, oh, well, this is why the Lord had not given me direction on this. So I'm so excited to bring you into this conversation and would love to just kind of start us out by kind of what you're seeing around this topic of resentment as you see it coming up in your work. And what do you think leads to this struggle in so many of us?
Oof. Well, it is a doozy of a topic. And I think that resentment is one of goes the most undetected of a lot of little sneaky hidden things in our hearts. It's hard to notice until it's kind of grown into this big resentment beast. And then it's right there in your face. And oftentimes it's not so much in the person's face who's carrying it, but everybody around them can see it, right? But a lot of times they can't see it themselves. In being a counselor, I notice this a lot, especially marriage counseling, but really just any area where kind of in line with your book, where they feel like I thought things would look different by now, right? I didn't expect things to work out this way, or different things that people have walked through. And so often, you'll hear about a spouse that just all of a sudden overnight, they decided to leave. No, they didn't. That was 20 years of resentment in the making, right? That was when we see behavioral things that people start making decisions that don't line up with who they are and their character. Oftentimes tucked beneath it are some hidden hurts that just weren't dealt with. And resentment especially makes me sad because it really does take almost, this is why community is so important. It's one of those things that it takes somebody else holding up a mirror for you to kind of see it. And it's very delicate because the truth is underneath resentment is a lot of hurt, lot of hurt, right? And things that just truly hurt your heart. And most people don't always know how to handle that very well and process that very well in a healthy way with the Lord and with their community and things like that. And so they have just all this stored away hurt that has then hardened their heart, and they don't even totally recognize that it's hardened their heart. And the saddest part is when you see, and I explain this sometimes with people I'm counseling, that, we think sometimes that we can compartmentalize hardening our hearts, and you can't.
Yeah.
If you decide to harden towards one person, it usually overflows into other areas of your life. And then you end up, you'll even hear people describe it. It's like almost like you turn into a shell of a person and you're like, I don't even recognize me anymore. And why I say it's such a mirror is because I consider it a great honor to be a counselor, but it's also such a hard, holy place because I have been convicted, right? And so I want to make sure I'm not just throwing other people under the bus, like all these other people who struggle with resentment.
Right.
No, anytime I see it, it's always a heart check for me. With me and the Lord, I'm like, okay, like it's just such a reminder of how much it destroys people's hearts and their lives when they don't deal with it. And I'm like, okay, we all have this in our hearts. Nobody is immune to this.
That's right.
And so we have to just, it's just so humbling for me to be reminded, all right, let's roll our sleeves up. Let's get a little dirty and let's do the work. It's hard work, but it's worth it.
Yeah, totally. I think a helpful way to view this, and we've done this for each one of the chapters, is we talk about sort of two different types of longing in the book. So there's vocational longing, right? the parts of us that maybe want to take that next step on the corporate ladder, or we want to get involved in a certain ministry or start a business or whatever it is. And then there's relational resentment. And I think 9 times out of 10, that's usually what we're talking about. But I also think that vocationally resentment can build in our hearts as well. And so if we think about kind of both of these camps, what do you see that looking like in terms of resentment? And what is that path towards redemption in that as we live in a broken world, right? Question of the day.
Yeah.
But would love your wisdom on that.
Yeah. Well, we just touched a little bit on the relational, right? And that is, like you said, tends to be what we hear a little more about. So maybe we could talk a little bit about vocational because, vocational, again, let's just be real here. That I would say for me when I talk about resentment, has been the one I've struggled with more lately.
Yeah.
And just, I think that there's different seasons where, relationally, it might be more of the deal. And then, like you said, vocationally it is, but it's still that same root of the hurt, but also you talk about this in the book too. And this is so convicting. Us feeling like we're owed something or that we deserve something or, I should be further along by now. My credentials, like that's something. Honestly, Rebecca, that God just today was talking to me about. He's like, I really don't care about your letters after your name, and I mean, that's great. Let's go do all the degrees. Let's do the trainings. None of that matters. And you mentioned this in the book, but it's just so true that Jesus, if the only thing he ever did for me was die on the cross, it's more than I deserve.
Yeah.
I don't need, he doesn't owe me one thing. Right. Yeah. And when I just sit in that truth, that's where that redemption comes from. So like talking vocationally, when we get caught up in like, well, I've been doing this longer than her. Why is she getting the opportunity and not me? Well, for me, I have letters behind my name. Why am I not the one speaking into that? Right. I mean, it's ugly. I mean, they're ugly thoughts, but it's the thoughts that come through. Now, obviously, we have to be careful not to meditate on those thoughts, which is why we are having conversations like this. But it is that I'm owed something. I deserve something. It's not fair. They overlooked me. I've worked harder. I've been doing this longer. And man, that's a dark spiral to get into. I love, you even had this in your book that gratitude and resentment can't coexist, right? And so that's something the Lord's been teaching me lately, of just being grateful. Like, again, vocationally, right now, I'm just in a weird in-between season. I'm like, I don't know. I have a lot of questions, but the Lord's been reminding me, hey, start thanking me for the people you are pouring into. Okay, thank you, God, that I'm in a season where I actually have a lot of time. I can pour into my husband and my kids more than I've been able to in several seasons, right? And just like shifting that perspective to, instead of me just staring at what's not happening and getting resentful.
Yeah.
And I go, wait, hold on. I may not be out doing all this, but I am over here just stewarding in my own home for this season. And I'm really grateful that I get to do that.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. We kind of outline these statements in each one of the chapters. And I've tried to kind of play these back to us in all of these episodes. And in the resentment chapter, there's a the world says statement, and then there's a God says statement. You touched on this really well. In this particular chapter, we say the world says God has treated me unfairly, meaning I'm not getting what I want, that next thing or that thing I'm longing for, I've been waiting forever on, or the thing that I want that my best friend just got, whatever that is for you, that feels unfair, right? Versus zooming out to an eternal perspective and seeing our ultimate redemption and salvation. And so the God says statement is, God redeemed my past, present, and future by sending Jesus to die on the cross. And so how can we do that in our everyday lives? Like how can we pull ourselves out of that moment of resentment to have that more gospel-centered perspective in the everyday? I think that can be really hard.
Yeah, it is. And I do think it takes some self-discipline, if you will. And what I mean by that is not a shaming, oh, I should do this, shouldn't do that, but more of a simple practices. Like, for example, most mornings, I'm not going to say every, because most mornings I start, as soon as I wake up, I say, let the morning bring me word of your unfailing love, for I put my trust in you. Show me the way I should go, for to you I entrust my life. It's a psalm. And for me, it's the of, yeah, Jesus, I see you, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm checking my flesh off, if you will, kind of like, hey, flesh, I'm going to need you to sit down. Well, guess what? There's days that I'm in a hurry, I run out the door and I don't do that. Now, again, it's not about the act of repeating a verse. It's the act of the submission to knowing, okay, Lord, I'm submitting this day to you. None of us are even guaranteed another day. Right? Like, I mean, I'm not, I'd like to believe I'm going to live to be 120, but I don't know if I will. So really, I should be approaching every day like, okay, we're doing this. It's another day. All right, Jesus, let's do this together. And I just feel like those small tweaks of just shifting our eyes, right, from down at ourselves and our circumstances and our desires and up at him and going, I'm just following you. Like, where are you going? You're leading. I'm along for the journey with you. And that just so takes the pressure off and it keeps us from getting self-centered, because I do believe until the day we die, we're going to battle not being self-centered. Yeah. I mean, I think it gets easier sometimes, but it's just, we're still flesh. We still think about us first and foremost. And then the Holy Spirit has to remind me, oh yeah, remember, look up and look at me and see what my plan is for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in my own heart, again, I'll point the finger right back at myself and reflect on my own journey. I think when I have seen resentment grow and grow and grow and stew in my heart, it is in the seasons of life where I've either been too busy to have the self-discipline in those everyday moments, or I've been unwilling to confront it. Those two things, I think for me personally, have led to the most resentment in my heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, the unwilling to confront it one is huge, actually. I think hurry for sure, but the unwilling to confront it, it kind of goes back to emotions. Again, a lot of times lying underneath resentment is a lot more emotion than just resentment. It's just, showing, like even with anger, it's not really anger people are feeling. They're feeling hurt or pain, are usually the two, big emotions underneath anger. And so when people haven't learned how to actually let themselves feel some things, let themselves feel the disappointment. Like, here's the interesting thing about emotions. They just want to be heard. And oftentimes we won't, especially as believers, we don't actually want to give them a voice because we think it's maybe a sin to say, I'm angry right now, or I'm feeling resentful right now. But if they aren't given a voice, they will find a voice. And usually it's in sideways ways that we're kind of like, eek, that came out weird and yucky and gross. And so even just being able to say, Lord, like even being able to say to the Lord, okay, you don't have to go advertise this on social media or whatever. You and your Lord in your little quiet space, you can say, Lord, I am feeling so resentful right now that my friend got that promotion and I didn't. And that makes me feel really yucky, God, because I want to be happy for her, but I'm just not. Like he can handle us talking to him that way. And like, it's in our heart anyways. He sees it. Right. And it's almost like he's saying, will you just like let it up and out? And that's really how simple it can be. But the problem is when we go for 20 years of all those little hurts that we never give a voice to, and then it just gets so hard and so big that, like you said, it gets scary to confront it for sure.
Yeah, so true. And I have also seen the Lord use those moments of willingness to enable me to show up for others on the other side of it too. Like I've given this example a lot in podcast interviews I've done about the book. Me and my husband don't have children yet. We've been married for a few years and I'm in my 30s. So naturally all my friends are having babies. I'm in that season of life. And just maybe a few weeks ago, I went to a baby shower, and the week before, I actually spent a good bit of time praying through this, trying to live out my message and just confronting like, Lord, you know, this is a desire in my heart. And I'm so thrilled for my friend. Like, help me hold both. I can't do that in my own strength. So let me admit how my heart's feeling sideways about this. And would you grant me the joy that doesn't feel like it exists in my heart for her, right? Like I want to be able to show up to that baby shower with joy and celebrate her and hold the tension in my own life. And just like a testimony of like that worked, you know, like I was able to show up well and show up with joy. And I think we all have that desire in those moments where our longing meets up with somebody else's blessing. Right. And so we just have to learn, I think, how to hold the tension.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a quote that I want to read for us out of this chapter. It's a C.S. Lewis quote. It's kind of in the middle of the chapter. Friends are following along, where he says, I do not know why there is this difference, but I'm sure that God keeps no one waiting unless he sees that it is good for him to wait. When you do get into your room, you will find that the long wait has done you some kind of good, which you would not have had otherwise. But you must regard it as waiting, not as camping. You must keep on praying for light. And of course, even in the hall, you must begin trying to obey the rules which are common to the whole house. And above all, you must be asking which door is the true one, not which one pleases you best by its paint and paneling. And I think that's such a helpful word as we consider our own waiting and kind of the purpose of that tension in knowing that God doesn't keep us waiting a second longer than his desire for that, right? And so how do we reckon with that?
First of all, it's crazy hard. And I don't know, when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to reckon with it, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in like hopeless way. I mean it in a lot of times it really does take, there's a reason for the quote, hindsight is 2020, right? You can look back and go, oh, now I see that. And I really love, what I love about that quote too, is he's saying that we will never fully understand why we have to wait a certain amount of time for some things and not others. Like, for example, my husband and I mean, I don't know why. It's still kind of crazy to me. I mean, I turned 21 2 weeks right before we got married, which now I look at my 18-year-old daughter and I'm like, she's a baby. Like, that's me in a couple of years. That's wild. So I didn't have the weight of a husband. And I don't mean that as a, let me put down anybody who has, but it's also like, I don't understand why, okay, that one just, woof, that came quick. And then there's other things, my husband and I have been married 20 years. We're still waiting on, right? Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, wait, why did this one thing took, 6 months? And then the other thing, 20 years, we're still waiting. And I do think that's where knowing the character and the heart of God is so valuable for us as believers to go, God, I don't understand it. I don't understand why some things just happen and some things I'm waiting for decades for this to happen. Yet I know you. I know your character, and I trust you that when you say in your word that to consider it pure joy, my friends, when you experience trials and tribulations of every kind, because it's going to produce all this character and perseverance. And it's like we all want the end result, but very few of us want to go through the actual, almost like mountain climbing, like we all want that peak moment, but not many people are like, oh yeah, I'll do the work to do the switchbacks and get up there to actually to have that moment. And so I think that answers one part of your question. You asked the second part of it though. Did I miss a part of it?
No,
sorry.
I think that's it. No, okay. I think that's it. So I'll cut this out.
Yeah.
No, that is awesome. Such great wisdom. And I wonder for our friends who maybe this one was like a hot button topic for them. Like they've been waiting on this conversation to release. Maybe this was a chapter that really particularly spoke into their season of life. We've shared some practical, and I wonder, is there anything that you would want to leave that woman with who press play because she's in it today. She's in the resentment, she's stewing in it, and she wants a way out. How would you want to encourage her?
Yeah. What comes to mind is Jacob wrestling with the Lord. Yeah. And when you think about wrestling, my son did wrestling for the first time this last year. And if you've ever watched a wrestling match, they're usually like a minute long. They're pretty short. And because it's intense though, like they're 1 to 2 minutes. I mean, they're in, they're out. And in that 1 to 2 minutes, man, it's rough. Like my son will come out with bloody noses and bruises and just all beat up. And as I thought about that, I thought, man, Jacob, he wrestled all night, right? And being willing, again, I think it goes back to the timing thing. I think sometimes we start to wrestle out something and we're like, oh, this is hard and it hurts. Never mind. Just kidding. I'm not going to press through to the breakthrough. And I would just say it's worth the wrestle. But here's the cool thing with God. He's very gracious. He's very kind in the wrestling with us. He doesn't make us wrestle. We get to choose, if we're like, all right, let's wrestle this out, Lord. And so when I say wrestle it out, I don't mean physical wrestling right now. I mean, get in your prayer closet. Do you journal? Do you, are you somebody who processes out loud to the Lord or to a friend or to a pastor or a counselor? If you have any hint that there's some resentment in your life, I beg with you, do not go another day without wrestling it out. because it will shift you as a person. It will shift your relationship with the Lord. It will shift your relationship with other people. And I feel like this is just an invitation from the Lord to wrestle it out. Not a you have to, not a shame on you if you don't, anything like that. It's more like, hey, there's so much freedom for you on the other side. Come on, you come do it. I'll do it with you. And it's going to be life-giving and it's going to be worth it. And so hopefully that's a charge for somebody to say, don't fear. If the Lord is inviting you into this, it means he sees, oh, there's so much freedom on the other side.
So good. So good. Well, I want to read us at the end of the book. I've written, I call it the letter to the reader, kind of a closing encouragement to us. So as we close out this series and hopefully the book, if you've made it all the way through or you've been listening to these conversations, I just want to read this over us as a little bit of an encouragement. So this is starting on page 229 if you're following along in the book as you listen. Recently, Dustin and I were admiring our town as the cold temperatures slowly melted into spring. It was a long winter, and my personality was defrosting as the sunshine warmed my face. As the first tulips burst open and our drift rose bushes showed new growth, I was filled with the hope of new beginnings and brimming with possibility. Isn't that what spring does? There's something about it that can make us stand a little taller as we hope towards the future. As we drove through a familiar neighborhood, Dustin pointed out some trees that were completely barren. Neighboring trees were filled with green leaves and blooms, but in the center of a stranger's lawn, a wide and spreading tree waited for spring's arrival. He said, "That one's a little late to the party, isn't it?" I giggled and said, "I think so." We slowly passed by and a lump formed in my throat. That's a little bit how I feel too. The next day, I walked my frequently trodden route in our neighborhood and thought about the tree from the day before. As I began to notice blooms bursting open and flower beds and redbud trees staking their claim across the horizon, I also couldn't help but notice the barren trees that still lacked leaves and buds. They were anything but weak, standing fortified and tall. They just need some time, I thought. Longing makes us feel too late in a hurry-up world. However, just because our leaves haven't burst forth doesn't mean God is not at work. Sometimes the greatest work happens in the dark. The pace God intends for you will not always match the world's and will scarcely make sense to others, and that is okay. More than that, it's good because it requires you to depend on God more fully than you ever have. I pray that you feel lighter after reading these pages. Longing will accompany our seasons of doubt, sneak up on us as we feel a pang of envy, surprise us when we confront our idols, and cause us to slow down as we embrace a lifestyle of rest. This is not easy work. In fact, how we navigate our waiting will largely be determined by the degree to which we are continually in awe of our Creator. Our eyes can't be fixed anywhere else or on anyone else. Lesser things will only distract us from the focus that Christ-likeness demands. His plan is good. His character is unchanging. His word is living and active. His spirit is within you. His timing is right. His perspective is perfect. As our time together draws to a close, I encourage you to come back to our Search Me, God prayer as often as you need. I find myself doing a mental roll call as I examine my heart throughout the day. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. May we always turn back to him when our hearts wander. May we always seek his presence as our source of comfort, joy, and peace. May we experience the nearness of Jesus to the extent that anything lesser seems insignificant in light of his glorious grace. May we never forget the redemption we experienced because of Christ's sufferings and the eternal life we are granted as a result of the empty tomb, now in part, but one day in full. I'm reminded of Paul's words in Philippians 1:23. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. We are hard pressed, but one day we will be free of longing, pain, suffering, and want. What a day that will be. So that is our letter to the reader at the end of the book. And I do think, I love that we included Psalm 139 verses 23 and 24 in that passage. We talk about it a lot in the book. And I think it's really helpful here as well as we just pray through our own willingness to confront our resentment that maybe is in our hearts today, and just asking God to examine us and to just reveal those parts of our hearts that are thinking about a situation or a person or a longing in a way that's contradictory to biblical truth, and allow him to work in that. And so, yeah, thoughts, parting words, encouragement before we go.
Yeah, I would just say maybe the final thought, even just to piggyback off what you said, is just to meet yourself and anybody that you encounter with resentment with compassion. And, Rebecca, how earlier you said that, like, when you prayed to be able to hold joy and your grief at the same time, and you're like, hey, only Jesus could make me do that, because I couldn't have conjured that in myself. And I think that's Jesus in us too, to have compassion when we see this resentment, right? Because again, just lying beneath that resentment is hurt. So I do, when I see this in people, when I see it myself, I'm like, you're hurting. I'm so sorry. Like, let me get down in the mud with you and sit with you in that pain. And that's what Jesus does. He doesn't shame us for it. Oh, you're resentful again. You know better, right? No, it's like, come here, child, let me sit with you. And that's what is just compassion. Like right now, just as we were talking, I'm like, I didn't plan to say this, but just compassion was rising up in me. And I'm like, oh, that's from Jesus. I'm like, the compassion of the Lord, the love of the Lord to meet us right where we're at, that's from him. And that's really when things like resentment just melts off, because you're just sitting with Jesus.
Yeah, so good. So good. Well, there is one question that I ask all of my guests that come on the Radical Radiance podcast. And I'm so excited to ask you again, Rachel. I love when people come back on the show, because God is always at work in our hearts. And so I love getting to ask people this question multiple times. And so in this season of your life, what about Jesus makes you radiant?
Yeah. Oh, I'm very curious what I said the first time. I'll have to go
back
and listen.
Go back and listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, that me being able to feel compassion for people, I really feel like that's from Jesus. And to just see people where they're at and go, man, like, I just see that pain. It's almost like he gives me this vision to see through what they're really going through, what they're really expressing, and just like seeing him how he does. And I know, like, just like you said, I'm like, that's Jesus for sure. Yeah.
So good. Well, share with our friends, where can they connect with you, grab your book, Image Restored? We also had a conversation on the show all about that book. So if you want a body image conversation with me and Rachel, go back and listen to that episode for sure, but would love for you to share all those details with everybody.
Yeah, my main landing hub is my name, RachelGilbert.com. You do spell Rachel, Rachael. And on there, you can find the podcast, the blog, counseling stuff. And then for fun, I hang out over on Instagram at Rachael J. Gilbert.
Awesome. Well, friend, I'm so grateful for your wisdom and just willingness to tackle a really tough topic with me. And so thanks for coming back on the show today. I'm grateful.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. It was fun.